So the Jewish people are God's chosen people. So the question is, do they think they're better than everyone else? Is there reasons why it seems they respond a little cold to people who are not Jewish? So sit tight. We're going to discuss this in just a few moments. Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim, Coffman, episode number 46, coming to you from the Holy Land. Rabbi, how are you today, sir?
Doing good. No complaints, and if I had complaints, no one's listening, so it doesn't matter, so we're good.
No one's listening, no one cares. Go back home.
Nobody cares. Who cares? Let's see what's going to be.
Exactly. Exactly. So, all right, cool. So this is an interesting topic. I'm totally on board with what's going on this one for sure. Not that I'm always on board with all your topics, but of course that's what we call it, controversial issues. Because
I don't really have to say. You just picked a topic. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I know.
I
right?
plead the fifth on that one.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do handle picking most of the topics. So
thank you very much. Okay, I just want to get that off my chest.
Okay. Good deal. Good deal. Okay, so I'm not sure where you want to start on this. You and I spoke on the phone or spoke on Skype earlier, and paint the context for us for this one, because this one was kind of your idea. I just kind of reworded it some. So someone came and approached you and they asked you what exactly?
So I actually had the pleasure of meeting one of my students last Saturday night, which I don't always get a chance to meet most of the people that I teach, but I had the pleasure having long talk. And one part of the discussion that came up is, when she was in Jerusalem, for Shabbos, she said it's very strange. People don't wish each other good Shabbos. Or if someone wishes someone good Shabbos, they don't answer. They just sort of keep walking.
You been talking about a Jew to another Jew, or a Jew to like a
Jew to another Jew? Yeah, nothing to do with nothing to do with we'll get to non-Jews. Don't worry.
Okay, but I'm gonna have to go back and read.
Specifically, a Jew to a Jew.
Oh, cool! I'm gonna have to go back and retitle this thing. I was under the impression it was talking about.
No, it's not necessarily talking about non-Jews, but actually, it does have what to do with non-Jews when Jews are out and about, and how they hold themselves and what they do and how they look in the eyes of non-Jews. That certainly we can we can get into. I think that's definitely relevant. So
agreed.
So the person was saying, like, if I wish someone good Shabbos, how come they don't respond? So I said, well, if you were in New York or New Jersey, most places, they also wouldn't respond, right? It's if you're out of town, meaning anything outside of New York or New Jersey, it's normally more friendly, right? It's just the Midwest, it's a lot more friendly. People a lot more, I would think, a lot more outgoing than, people being a little bit maybe snobby in, New York and New Jersey. So, but the question really is, and this really bothered this person, and, it's not the first time, certainly not the first time I've heard it, and I've definitely experienced it, also here, in Israel as well as in the States, and that is why, what's the problem?
Okay.
Why can't someone wish someone else good Shabbos and the person answers? What is, what is the person to snob and say, sticks their nose up and say, like, nah, I'm not going to answer you. Why, right. What do you have to hide? If someone wishes you good Shabbos, you can't answer? The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, as it says in the Ethics of Our Fathers, you should greet everyone with a happy face, right? But what if you're in a bad mood? What if you're tired? What if, you just heard a close relative just got cancer or something, and someone says, oh, hi, how are you? What's going on? You don't necessarily want to answer, right? A person doesn't want to say give over, himself, because, they're not in the mood, so to speak. And we go through all kinds of mood swings, etc. I'm not going to justify what people do, because most people know I never answer those type of questions. Why do people smoke? Why are they overweight? Why do Orthodox Jews go to casinos? Well, that's not that that's not for me to answer.
Right.
But what I can say, what I can say in general is that to wish someone, if someone wishes you good Shabbos, you shouldn't walk away and not answer, because there's a statement, as Talmud says, brought down in the Medrash. It says derech eretz kidma l'Torah, right? Derech eretz means literally walking in the land, right? The way of the land comes before Torah. What does that mean? That it comes before Torah? It means that a person has to have good character traits, right? You read throughout all the Musar books. You read in Path of the Just. You read in Shari Tshuva, the Gates of Repentance by Rabbeinu Yonah. It's all about character development. It's all also about feeling like a piece of dirt and understanding what we need to do in order to make ourselves, better people. But there are things, I would think, and I think other people would agree, that are obvious. That every person, even a non-Jew has to keep any mitzvah, right? That is universal. Don't steal. Don't murder. What about, there's a question about speaking Lashon Hara, speaking badly against others. Doesn't really apply to them or not, because it's the way of the world. That's what people do. Maybe it's only specifically for Jews, but it may not be a good character trait, anyway. But I don't want to digress. I want to get to the point at hand, and that is, there's no rhyme or reason in logic why someone should diss somebody else. Diss meaning that you just keep walking, right? That comes under the category 100% of being rude. Now, if someone wants to get in my mind or get in the other person's mind and say, why does a person do that? Why would a person do that? Now, this gets into the deep in the psyche of a person that, we have an obligation. Everyone's created, as we saw in Genesis, the book of Genesis, at the beginning when God breathed in the spirit of life into man, right? Everybody, not just Jews, right? The Torah says all men are created in God's image, right? If we're all created in God's image, that means there's a spark inside of all of us that really want to do the right thing, right? That if we didn't have that spark, then how would we have any connection to spirituality whatsoever? We'd have no connection. So it comes on the Torah, and the Torah says, okay, there are things that are permitted, things that are forbidden, right? And the things that are forbidden take you away from service to God. Things that are permitted, enhances that relationship. But there's a caveat over here. The caveat is that we have an obligation, Jews have an obligation, they say every day, at least all men say every day in the morning, Yivdu es Hashem b'simcha, more of my Hasidic side coming out. There's an obligation to serve God with great joy. But what if you have a mortgage payment, that same day or during the week? You have no idea where it's coming from, right? Or a person struggling, in other areas. A person gets burdened down with life. Again, I'm not excusing what people do, and we'll get to other things in a second. But when a person gets burdened down with life, they forget the basics. You're going to say, how can a person forget the basics of, when someone greets them, they give a sour face. Like, what did that person deserve, to get a sour face back at them? Right. Nothing, right? Maybe you're angry at them. Okay, maybe, you have something against them. But the reality is they did absolutely nothing to deserve that sour face. So that being the case, why would a person give a sour face to someone else? In general, there's no rhyme or reason except for the fact that there are other things going on. There are other things going on in their mind. Now, if it comes to Shabbos, I shouldn't be thinking about other things anyway, right? I should only be, focused on the spiritual. So if I'm walking down the street and someone says good Shabbos, why would I keep walking and not answer? That doesn't, there's no logical answer here except for the fact that it's rude, right? And that that people can be rude. It's inexcusable. Right? It's totally inexcusable. Now, if you live in a community, or in a place where people are more friendly, there are places that are more friendly, less friendly, right? But again, a person cannot forget one of the basic ideas of Judaism. And one of the basic ideas is that you have to be who you are on the outside and on the inside. Right? Someone who's, especially for a rabbinic scholar, what you see is what you're going to get. In other words, how they act on the outside is exactly who they are on the inside. Now, in the outside world, a person can be fake on the outside, right? You can be fake on the outside, and you can think whatever you want. Like, I remember I used to come back to the States every year and a half, to visit family. And, we do some shopping. You go to Home Depot, to other places. You walk in, and all of a sudden there were like 2-3 people there to greet you, right? At least back in the day. They would say, "Hi, I'm Bob, Fred, Stan." I'm like, "Bob, Fred, Stan." They're like, "How can we help you today?" And I was like, "Oh, I need some batteries. I need this." Like, "Oh, batteries, aisle 1. Someone's taking me over here. Someone's taking me over there." But at the end of the day, if I dropped dead of a heart attack, it's like, okay, he died, next. I mean, I'm not saying people are that shallow, but I'm just saying that, there are things that people do externally, and certainly people will do it externally to make money, right? That's, customer service, extremely important. Whether people, people agree, agree to that or not, that's, that does go a long way, but at the end of the day, a person, certainly a Jew, can never forget they're a Jew 24 hours a day, regardless of where you are, where you go, what you do. You have an obligation, there's an obligation to interact with others. So this comes to the other point, which is when a person's outside, they're in they're in the post office, they're in a bank, right? They're waiting in line. Do they cut in line? Do they push in line? Do they do other things? Now the problem is that if we represent what the Torah is, someone's going to look at them and say, "Oh, look at these Jews. Look what they do. They cut in line. They're not nice. They're, if the kids are screaming, it's like, oh, they'll say they have too many kids." I mean, it's not, not a relevant thing. But, in general, how we appear, to others makes a tremendous impression. On the Jewish people, because we're the only group. I think we mentioned this before. We're the only group. If someone does something wrong, and they're a Jew, the entire Jewish people get blamed. It's all like if an Italian in Brooklyn does something, it's like, "Oh, we're against all Italians. We're going to start burning, Italian people's homes, or Polish people, or blacks, or whatever." Right. Yeah, it doesn't happen. Right? It's only by Jews. There's a collective idea that all Jews are intertwined. So if we're intertwined, that means that if we represent Torah, we have to be extremely careful. So therefore, even if a non-Jew, greets you, you shouldn't give him a sour face. There's a famous story with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, may his name be blessed. He was a Rav in America, in Muncie, and also head of the Shiva in Brooklyn. And every day, there were actually, after he died, there were a number of nuns who came to come to the family, and come to the mourner's house, and they're like, what are you doing here? And it said, "You should know, this rabbi would pass us every day and greet us in a warm way. He understood who we are, whatever, whether, he disagreed with what we do or whatever the case is, didn't matter. He treated us, as humans, or better than humans. He treated us like anyone should be treated. He greeted us, we greeted him back, and, he went on his way. You think he had to go out of his way, to do that, but that's who he was. That's what he represented. It didn't matter, the person was a non-Jew, the person was a priest, the person was a nun. That's how he greeted, people, and that's how he exemplified, what he learned. So in this case, some people will say, well, it's only a non-Jew. What do I have to be so nice to a non-Jew? And a lot of people get, they might get somewhat the wrong impression, even though people may, treat them in not a nice way, right? Because, especially when it comes to conversion, and, people are going to be suspect of if they're sincere, or not. But, there's no mitzvah whatsoever, to walk on people, to tread on people, to abuse people, in different ways, and someone's going to come and they're going to jump up and down and say, this person did this, and this rabbi did that, and someone else did something else. So if it's true, then it's wrong. Right. Why do people do it? People do all kinds of things, but, they forget basic human dignity, right? And, there should be nothing on a person's mind, if they're coming back from synagogue, unless it's, it's like pouring rain or it's freezing out, and they're running home. Someone wishes good Shabbos, is just gonna, they're just gonna run to get to, to get to safety or whatever. Even so, right? Even so, there's, sometimes there's this mentality like, and I'm not sure myself, 100%, where it comes from. But there's this mentality like, okay, you said good Shabbos to me, very nice. Why do I have to say good Shabbos back? Because it's common courtesy. It's common courtesy. But there are things that, people get so caught up in what they learn and what they do, they forget, they forget about basic things. Now, in order to give them a merit, so we don't totally trash these type of people, a person can be burdened with all kinds of things. We have no idea. Nobody knows what goes on in anyone else's personal, life. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But in most cases, someone walking down the street, right, we don't necessarily know what's going on in their personal life. If someone greets you, there's no reason not to greet them back. Right? People say, I don't like to be fake. Right? America's about being fake.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Like, no. You don't want to know how I am. You don't care how I am. I used to hate that.
There's a saying that says, how are you is a greeting, not a question.
Mm-hmm.
Took me a long time.
Or it's like, who are you? It's like, oh, you want to know what I do for a job? No, that's not who you are.
Yeah.
That's just what you do to make money, right? But people forget, and people just, it doesn't, people are so used to it, it doesn't even, it doesn't even register. But the reality is there is something, even if it's fake, there is something to greeting. I mean, as the Mission Pirkei Avos says, there is something to greeting someone with a smile, right? With saying how are you, whatever. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, even if that's the beginning and the end of the conversation, right? But if someone says how are you and you keep walking and ignore them, or you say something underneath your breath, what does that show? That shows that you think you're better than them. Oh, you said good Shabbos to me. You said hello to me. I'm not going to answer you.
Right.
Right. That gives off tremendously bad vibes.
Okay, so
right, and people see it. Yeah, go ahead.
So we're actually already almost. I can't believe the time flew so fast already. It feels like we've just been talking for 5 minutes. So can we go ahead now and actually move into how Jewish people supposedly treat non-Jewish people, and how are they supposed to treat them? Even this, to me, this is not as relevant for the show, but you can touch on it. Would be how Jewish people treat Noahides, ones who are known Noahides, ones who have left idolatry and are clinging to Torah.
Well, it's been a great show. Hope everyone enjoyed it. It's like I did a show for somebody once. They said, listen, I'm going to ask, a bunch of questions. I'm giving you 3.5 minutes to answer the major questions people have. I'm like, 3.5 minutes. Okay, ready? Here goes. Can you read my lips? I'm going to do it in mime. Ready?
We'll do it time lapse video.
It's a good thing I'm drinking Coke. You guys all be dead by now. In any case, not to digress, there's, how should we treat non-Jews? Well, if we would, right, and harassing people, it's wrong. There's no question. And I always think in the back of my mind, what does this person think? It makes the Jewish community look bad. Say, oh, look at these kids. Look how these parents treat their kids. Look how they start. Look how they teach. Look what they teach them. They teach them that, I may be a bus driver, I may be a non-Jew. It gives you a right to treat me like garbage. That's the conclusion they come to, right? And if that's the conclusion they come to, and it's true, right? I'm not going to deny the fact. Let's say it's true. So then you come into the problem of desecrating God's name, right? You're not sanctifying God's name by any stretch. You're making it a lot worse. So, there's an obligation if we're supposed to be, a light into the nations. Being a light into the nations doesn't mean we're better. The only difference between a Jew and a non-Jew is the fact that we have Torah, we have mitzvahs, and those mitzvahs should change us. Those mitzvahs should make us into who we are and make us better people. You non-Jew don't want the Torah, fine. You don't have an obligation to convert. You have an obligation to keep whatever applies to them. So a Noahide has to keep what they want. And Noahides, now, you brought it up. Noahides, I was just explaining before the end of my last class that someone had asked something, about Noahides. And Noahides, I think, have it more difficult than anybody.
Yep.
More than converts. And the reason is because A, there aren't so many established communities. B, nobody knows what to do with them. Jewish, Orthodox rabbis don't necessarily know what to do with them because, they don't want to convert. They're not interested in conversion, but they want to have a connection. The question is how much of a connection they can have, and all that we're not going to get into. But the point is that really the Jewish community doesn't know what to do with them. They don't really want them. Certainly the non-Jews don't want them because they're not Christians, right? And they're certainly not believing Christians. If they're not believing Christians, then you're going to fry in hell forever. So nobody seems to want them. They don't have their own communities. They don't have, they don't have so many leaders. They don't have a curriculum to learn from, so to speak, even though people are trying to change that, etc. Nonetheless, they have a real problem, right? It's a real problem. So someone's going to come along, and say, listen, I don't want to convert. I want to learn. I want to be the best non-Jew I can be. So what's your normal Orthodox rabbi going to say? Why don't you convert? He goes, I don't want to convert. So, okay, what am I allowed to do? Teach me. I want to be part of things, right? But the reality is, it's not so simple, right? In a lot of different ways. But there's a mitzvah to help them. If someone has the ability to help them, they should. If they don't have the ability, send them to someone that does. But certainly, what a lot of times happens, even in people who are sincere, and they want to convert, what happens is they get blown off. And the rabbinical court will take their sweet time because they want to make sure the person's real, and they'll they have a tremendous responsibility for what they do. So that one student say they moved into the Jewish community, and the rabbinical court says, okay, we'll see you in a few months, keep in touch, whatever. Says, don't worry, we'll be back. And the rabbinical court's like, okay, we'll see. They're like, no, you don't get it. We're gonna be back. We're gonna be your worst nightmare, right? They're gonna be back. So they texted me after this meeting, and they said, what does rabbinical court mean? They don't think we're sincere. We just moved into the community. We're doing this. We're doing that. I said, you have to understand, the rabbinical court comes in contact with people a dime a dozen, and most people flake out. Less than 20% actually finish the process. So they say, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if you're real. They said, well, we are real. I said, I'm not denying that, but, they understand who they're dealing with. At the same time, there is an idea, to push people away. We don't want non-Jews infiltrating. We don't want, we're not proselytizing. We're not interested in converts, etc. But even if someone doesn't want to convert and someone wants to learn what it means to be a non-Jew, and that, without conversion, it's weird. In this generation, there are more people coming out, but the majority, in the Orthodox community, they're gonna think it's weird, right? They're gonna think I'm weird for teaching people like that. They're like, right. Why do you speak to Jews? I go, of course I speak to Jews. I told my Rabbi this once. I said, why do you think I come in Jerusalem every day and learn in the synagogue? At least I should have a connection to Jews. And he's like, all right, whatever. You're like, totally blew me off. But in general, there's this idea that. I'm not saying that is based on anything, but there's this idea that, okay, you want to come to us, very nice, but you're certainly going to have to prove yourself. And who says I have to roll the red carpet, right? Now that's a way of protecting ourselves and protecting the community, but at the same time, there's a limit, right? There's a limit of pushing someone away. If you see somebody is sincere. And they're really sincere, which is what some people have a claim against me because you never meet these people. How do you know them? How do you know they're sincere, right, etc. But in general, if you can ascertain that the person's sincere, I don't believe there's a mitzvah to spit on them. Other people will say no. You got to put them through the grind. You got to really see, where they are, and at a certain point. That's not, I definitely disagree with that. But at the same time, so you're going to say, okay, so what should they do to a non-Jew, right? So they should treat them with dignity. That's what they should do. And, sometimes they can come off as being holier than thou. They can come off, like a rabbinical court or, other people can come along and they look like they have a chip on their shoulder. Now, having a chip on your shoulder obviously is wrong. Right? Being conceited and think you're better is wrong. And the only thing that makes us different between a Jew and a non-Jew is the Torah that we learn and the more mitzvahs that we do. But what gives us the right to put anyone down just because they're a non-Jew?
Right.
Right. That's there's an idea. Again, I'll mention this once, twice, and 100 times. There's an idea of common human decency. Now, people are going to jump up and down and throw tomatoes at the screen and all that and say, I've come across a lot of Jews. What you're saying is garbage because they treat people like dirt. Right. There are a lot of people that may do that.
Right.
Right. And you may come in contact with people that do that. Right. So, I'm always fond of saying, so don't differentiate between, Jews and Judaism, because Judaism does not say that. Judaism does not preach that.
Right.
Right. Judaism preaches that you have an obligation to be a light to the nations, not to trample on the nations. Right. So, you have to show common decency. Right. So, the main question here is, so why don't a lot of people have it? Or I'd say a lot. Why don't some people have human decency? Because they have weaknesses like everybody else. Huh. Right? They get caught up into themselves or whatever, and they say, oh, it's just a non-Jew, like who cares? So I'll trample on it. So what? It's a non-Jew. That doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's right. This person could be going, this person could be going through all kinds of different things, and therefore, forgets about what his purpose is and does things that are wrong. That can certainly happen. I don't think there's any question. It doesn't justify it. At the end of the day, it doesn't justify it, but what it does is it gives us a bad name. I'll give one example. In a certain place, Orthodox Jews have a bad name. Actually, probably a number of places in real estate. Right, in general. Because, whatever, unscrupulous things they do and other things, whatever, not going to go into detail. But they have a bad name. Why do they have a bad name? It's very simple. Because they do things that are underhanded. They act, whatever. And do things that are wrong. And they give all Jews a bad name. Right? So therefore you're going to say, why should that be? Right? Again, all Jews are intertwined. If they're intertwined, you get a few bad eggs or more than a few bad eggs, it makes everybody look bad. Right? So, there's a tremendous responsibility, that we have to the world. And if we don't uphold that responsibility, right? If we don't uphold that responsibility, we're held accountable in a very serious way. It's not just, we're going in the ways of the non-Jews and the repercussions of all that. We're not, if you read classic Musar, classic books and ethics, it's all about fixing bad character traits, right? Ego is the biggest one, right? Is being conceited. The Orchot Tzadikim, the ways of the righteous, he brings out that being conceited is the base of all bad character traits, right? So it just trickles down. If a person's got an ego, a person doesn't serve God with great joy, what that can lead to. Doing things by rote is also horrific. You're doing things on automatic pilot, so you don't pay attention to what you do. And when you don't pay attention to what you do, you fall. And when you fall, you give yourself and other people, a bad name. Now, it could be 90%, the Jewish people are okay. Or Orthodox Jews are fine and they don't do this. You're right, but if there are 10% that are bad, and give Jews a bad name, it doesn't matter what the other people do. Because I've heard time and time again, I've had conversations with people. Someone contacted me about conversion, and he contacted 20 other different people, 20 other different rabbis, rabbinical courts, whatever. And he said, "You're the only one who spoke." I didn't even get a chance to speak to anybody. He said, "You're the only one who spoke to me." I was like, "Wow, you're in the wrong place." I said, "I feel your pain." He said, "But you're the only one who gave me the time of day." He said, so he asked me. He said, "Listen, I understand you're supposed to be pushed away, whatever, but." I'm like, 0 for 20. I'm like, yeah, if you were a baseball player, you would have been benched. If you're 0 for 10, it's game over. I said, if someone is sincere and they're showing that they're sincere, right, you still have to check into them, whatever, but, if someone has questions, I think if someone's got the ability to help them, I don't think there's any reason to push them off. Now, it could be there are other reasons why, people get pushed off or whatever, but it leaves a very negative, a very negative taste. There are people that just have a negative experience, dealing with Jews. It's not, I wouldn't say it's across the board. I think, there are people who've told me they haven't had too many negative experiences. I've definitely come in contact with people extremely angry, at a lot of different things. And, I don't know all the issues, what they were dealing with, but certain things, what they were saying, was 100% and nothing was ad-libbed and nothing was added or subtracted or whatever, then they're 100% right. Right? So then someone will come to me and say, well, why would people do that? Why would people act this way? Why would people say this? People do all kinds of things, right? I'll give another example, another interesting example. There was a Jew who sold, an Orthodox Jew who sold clothing, right? And he sells like a skirt, or sorry, like a blouse. It's like gold embroidered. Sells it for a high price. And etc. One time, this woman washes it, it comes off. Right, a normal washing. So she comes back and says, like, my money back, this, that. You ripped me off. You said this is gold embroidered, and it came off in one wash. A normal wash. And whatever, he's doing this, he's giving this excuse and that excuse and whatever. And she says, but you're an Orthodox Jew. Don't you have an obligation to uphold the higher standard? Now, if you're in the world of doing Jewish outreach, never say this. And what did the person answer? The person said, why do you put Jews on such a high pedestal? So in my language, this person transgressed the 615th commandment of don't be a moron. Why in the world would you say to a sect? This wasn't a non-Jew; it was a secular Jew.
Okay.
Could have been a non-Jew. Would have been even worse, right? Why in the world would you say to somebody, "Okay, so I swindled you. You're right, I swindled you. So why do you put Why would you put Orthodox Jews on such a high pedestal?" That is the wrong thing to say.
That's funny,
right? So what is this woman going to take from this conversation? Orthodox Jews are swindlers and they don't care. They'll rip you off and whatever. Gives us a bad name. But, this is a case that, it just shows, that we're our own worst enemy, and how careful a person has to treat his workers, how they have to look in public and what they do, and how to be, totally honest. It's, these are not easy things. A lot of things in business, according to Jewish law, are Torah obligations. Right, and people mess around with them like they don't really mean that much, and we could end up destroying ourselves in the process. But it's how a person shows themselves, right? It's how they give over how they want to be represented. So that you'll ask, in certain places, yeah, Orthodox Jews have a bad name. Well, isn't that terrible? Sure is. But I've spoken to a lot of people that say, well, you're pretty normal. And I've been called a lot of things normal. Normal might be like the biggest compliment, but people will say, like, okay, you're down to earth, you understand where we're coming from, whatever. People that we've come in contact with, what have they done? They haven't given us the time of day. They pushed us off. They don't answer our phone calls. They don't answer our emails. Now again, people are busy. There are plenty of Jews to work with. They don't necessarily want to deal with non-Jews, but even so, someone can get a courtesy call and say, listen, I'm busy, call me back next week, this, that. They could keep blowing them off. At some point, you got to deal with people, and you gotta show yourself of what the Torah is going to represent. In other words, there's an idea of a desecration of God's name that if someone learns from what you do in a negative way, in other words, it's something that's wrong, but they take from what you do and they learn a negative thing from it, that's a desecration of God's name. I mean, there's a very specific definition of what desecration of God's name is, but that's one aspect. One aspect of it. So if someone cuts in line, I've seen this also many times in a supermarket, where there's a line. So what will someone do? They'll put their carriage, wherever it is, and they'll go back and forth putting stuff in the carriage, and then they'll move up in the line. But they were never standing in line, right? I see this all the time. They were never standing there, right? So what do? They put their carriage there so they can get out quicker, right? And they're going to go to this aisle, that aisle, the other aisle, pick up this, pick up that, pick up the other thing. And they say, no, I was here. I was here from the very beginning. Yeah, your carriage was there, but you physically weren't there, right? So what does that do? It gives them a bad name. It's just being obnoxious and say, no, I have the right to do this, and I'll cut you in line, and you're gonna have to like it. And too bad, like nah. They're like, okay, so you have to deal with it, right? But it doesn't mean it's right. Or someone will say, I was here 10 minutes ago, right? You see that square, that square on the floor? I was standing there, but I just went out to get something, so now I'm back. I've seen plenty of people, do that also. And like, to me, it never surprises me. Like, especially being here, some of the things that go on, but that's ludicrous. Huh. I mean, in simple terms, if you put a shopping cart, or as the English would say, a trolley. I don't know how you get a trolley in a supermarket, but you put a trolley, right? So wherever you're standing, in line, and you keep coming back and filling this thing up, you're not in line. You're just not in line. So why is it? No, I was here. And I see that, on a regular basis. I just don't I don't even argue with people because it's just not worth it. We're going to sit there and tell them, no, you weren't it. Yes, I was. No, that, people are very adamant. They want to get in and out. They don't want to spend so much time. But what gives you the right to cut in line? I don't have to wait in line. I'm not interested in waiting in line. I mean, it keeps me out of trouble in my house, so that's good. But I don't have any interest staying any longer than I have to. So what gives you the right to cut me in line? Because that's what we do. I mean, I get, the list goes on. I saw things when I used to sit with my Rabbi, one of the top rabbinical courts here in Israel, and people would come in dressed to the hilt, big hats, long coats. Admit that they stole and admit that they've done other things. And I'd be sitting there like shell shocked. I'd be like, like, how could this be? Like, oh my God, whatever. So my Rebbe would always say, it's a good thing you have a connection to me. Otherwise, like, you'd lose confidence, in the religious world of what goes on. Right. But there are cases where, where people out, they don't want to pay something. The guy says, listen, you owe me the money, this, that, and, other ways not going to pay, right? So you have to take it to rabbinical court. But, when it comes to rabbinical court, everyone gets cooked up and it's all intense and, whatever. And it's just, and some of these are open and shut cases where the guy just lied. The guy simply lied, didn't want to pay somebody, right? It took him to court. Now he's going to pay, but why did it have to come to that? Right. Because the guy, the guy's a thief. The guy's a thief. He doesn't want to pay. Right. And, and I sat there, sometimes I would sit there like, if I wouldn't see things with my own eyes, right, I would never in a million years believe, people could stoop so low. So one of the things the Talmud says, how you can test a person, right, is how they deal with money, right? That's one of the things. You can test a person, how he gets angry, and how he drinks and what happens when they drink. You definitely don't want to drink with me. In any case, that I take no responsibility for whatever may come out of my mouth. But in general, when it has to do with someone's pocket, some people are unscrupulous. I mean, I'll give an example. Someone, here, property is worth a lot. So, people can build out, and add on more to their apartment. Obviously they have a lot of kids, it certainly helps, et cetera. So someone builds an extension. And he builds an extension. When he builds the extension, he can see straight into someone's living room. Right? Now, right. Who in their right mind is going to build an extension and let someone see straight into the living room? Right. Nobody. Right? So what does the other guy say? The other guy says, I showed you the plans and you signed off on the plans. He said, yeah, that's when this place was over here. Not when you could see straight into my living room. He said, I never would have allowed that. So they're going back and forth, and one of the rabbinical court judges, very, very sharp, gets up and he says, listen, if I were to build an extension and I could see straight into your kitchen or I could see straight into your living room, he says, are you going to give me permission? Would you give me permission to do that? So what does the guy answer? He did. This other guy did. He said, what do you think? He's out of his mind? Right. He's off his rocker. They made him take it down. Now, what happened? The guy totally lied. He totally lied. Doesn't make any sense, but the guy had to stop him because he's causing damage by scene straight into his living room. So, as I'm sitting there watching this, I'm totally, I guess I shouldn't be, so amazed, but how, okay, I understand this guy wants to build, and he wants to add on, etc. But you can't do it at the expense of somebody else. You're taking away their light, you're taking away their view, different. If he agrees, okay, it's one thing, but who in their right mind is going to want, you're going to want to see in his living room. So you asked me the $1 million question, and this is what I think people wanted to hear, and that is, what is this guy thinking? What is this guy thinking? That he's gonna allow someone, he's gonna do such a thing, against someone else when he knows it's wrong. And the answer is, when it comes to your pocket and it comes to other things, you don't care. It's my way or the highway. Okay, you want to take me to court? Take me to court. Go ahead. Right? I'll call your bluff. And he called his bluff. He ended up in court and he lost. But there's another thing. Just mention in passing. If a person wants to build, right, you have to go to the municipality, and you have to get permission to build. Now, it can take a long time, and it can be very expensive. So a lot of people build without permits. Right? I'm not saying they're doing things illegally, like destroying the building or whatever. I'm just saying they build, let's say, without a permit. Right? So what happens? Someone comes along and squeals. Right? Squeals to the government that this guy's building illegally. Now, someone who squeals to the government is probably, the worst name a person could have. Certainly in Europe, you had these, you had someone who was a Moser, someone who's someone who's an informant. And a Jewish informant was like the worst thing a person could be. So there are people that will squeal on someone else, that will, they'll inform, to the municipality, this guy's building doesn't have a permit. And then they'll come down, they'll give him all these fines, etc. Or they may stop him, they may make him plug up whatever he did, cost them more money. So what's the punishment? What's the punishment for a Jewish informant? Right? He goes to I'm not talking where he's causing damage, where the other person's causing damage. Not causing damage. Right? So what's the punishment? Punishment is he loses his portion of the world to come. So I asked somebody this. I said, I don't understand. I said, a person, his whole life wants to keep Torah and mitzvahs, and he informs on someone else giving up his portion of the world to come. I said, why would a person do that? So this person said to me, he said, it's very simple. He said, if I can't build, for whatever reason, whether I don't have the land to build, or I don't have money to build, or whatever, if I can't build, I'm not going to let you build. Right, so what do we call that in the Jewish vernacular? We call that saras ayin. That means having a very small eye. Right, that means being jealous of someone else. And because you're jealous of someone else, so you'll do things against them, regardless of, whatever the reasons, whether you could build, you couldn't build, whatever the case is, but you lose your portion of the world to come. Right? That to me, that to me boggles the mind. It means they don't care about you. They only care about themselves. Right? They're self-centered and selfish, and they'll say, you know what? I'll lose my portion of the world to come, but you're not going to build. You're not going to build without a permit. That's not, that's not logical. It just means that his character traits are so bad that he lets, he lets the best get to him. And I've seen more times than not, whenever someone builds, everybody loses. People don't agree, people this, people that, give people a hard time. It's the worst character traits, the worst character traits come out. And, this is not what the Torah wants. The Torah wants us to be the best we can be. The Torah wants us to work, certainly on character development, and we have to be on guard, all the time, not just for the sake of our spouses, our kids, etc., but for the greater world. You go on a bus, you're waiting in line, etc. You have to adhere to what the Torah says. You're not allowed to cut. You're not going to put. I mean, it's, certain things that I see. It's like, you got to be kidding. Like where is the education? Why are people, like this? So the Torah itself is not magic. The Torah doesn't, if someone says, oh, I'm going to come into Torah, my life's totally going to change, for the better, and all things are going to be great, it doesn't mean that. What it means is when a person envelops what the Torah says, and they go in the Torah ways, yes, they see change. Yes, they have building blocks, one on top of the other. It doesn't mean they're perfect, right? But at the same time, when a person realizes speaking Lashon Hara is forbidden, and what it does, and when they hear it after a while, other people speaking, and it makes them nauseous, it makes them, discuss how can a person say such a thing, it means they're more sensitive. And when they're more sensitive, they hold to a higher standard. And when they want to hold to a higher standard, they're going to change other aspects of their life. But it's not easy. The evil inclination never rests, right? So therefore, we always have to be, on guard. So I give people a very simple thing to do. Right? If they want to work on cursing, everybody curses. Most people curse. Right? It's the way also the way of the world. So imagine if you took an hour a day, half an hour a day, no matter what happens, I'm not going to curse. Right? No matter what happens, I'm not going to curse. So they work and work and work on themselves. Then when they start hearing other people curse, they see that they're more sensitive to that. Doesn't mean they become righteous overnight, but they become more sensitive. So imagine they're building their sukkah. They take right hammer, hit left thumb. Right? What do they want to do? They want to say every 4-letter word in the book. But you know what? Because they've been working on themselves, they don't say it. They don't say it. All right, they may think it. Okay, that's another level. They may think every 4-letter word that's there, but they don't actually say it. That they see. They see after that, or they see after time they've worked. And this is something small. This is something very, very small. When you see something like that, right, and you have that higher awareness, whether it's about cursing, whether it's about speaking badly against others or whatever, that higher awareness has an effect on the inside, has an effect on the soul. When it has effect on the soul, it's a snowball effect. It affects other things, other character traits. One good deed, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, leads to another good deed. Right? And a person sins, God forbid, leads to another sin. Right? But all these things, they either come out positive or negative. But even if they're positive, don't think for 1 second the evil inclination is going to say, okay, we'll let him off the hook. We'll give him his victory today. No problem. We're going to leave him alone for a while. Not true. Come back with other things, try and trap the person, etc. In order to make mistakes. Whenever a person has to be vigilant. But we have to be so vigilant, in the eyes of others, to show that, yeah, Jewish people are like malachim. We are like angels if we act the proper way. If not, then we're like everybody else. And then we fail. We fail in our mission. And then people say, oh, Jews do this and Jews do that. And, there are anti-Semites out there because they're anti-Semites. But if we bring things upon ourselves, we do, we're very good. Either we raise ourselves to the highest mountain, or we go all the way to the dirt. There's nothing in between. So if we do what we're supposed to do, then we're enlightened to nations. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, we're no different than any animal, right? We're no better, right? So we always want to have a good name, but having a good name is enveloping what the Torah says and wanting to change, and become who we become. But it doesn't come at the expense of others. Right, and there's this common courtesy. Like someone, I'll give one other example. Someone said, if I'm at a school and I hold the door open, and someone just walks in without saying thank you, how can someone walk in and not say thank you?
Right. Yep, I'm with you.
That's like, that's unheard of. They're like, why is that person grateful? I opened the door.
It's unheard of. Maybe unheard of where you're from. We see stuff like that around here all the time.
I'm not saying it's uncommon.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying it's unheard of in the sense that I've never seen such a thing. No, you see things all the time. Try and fight for a parking spot. Here in other places. Forget it.
Yeah.
It's a crazy. It's a crazy thing, especially the way people drive here. Certain lights are just good advice. Doesn't necessarily mean
that's true.
Doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. But for a Jew, okay, I understand. If a non-Jew doesn't have Torah, a secular Jew doesn't have Torah, okay, so they do what they want. They're not into courtesy, not into this. Okay, they don't have a guide. If the Torah is the guide, and someone holds open the door, the least you can do is acknowledge it. That's the least you can do. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends with them, but at least you have to acknowledge it. If you don't acknowledge it, you're an ingrate. And there's nothing worse than being an ingrate.
That's funny. So, hold on one second. Topic. Okay, so here's the deal. In the last couple minutes, if you want to, since I don't feel like we've really tipped over the controversial part yet, so not deeply anyway, but I think we're fixing to, but you've only got a couple minutes to do this in, so, and because I'm going to have to, literally, it's 4:59, I've got to get shut down here in just a minute, but a follow-up comment on last week's show. Was it last week? Was it last week? I think it was last week. Regarding the people who got killed in the synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Okay, because there's new information that has been out there, and now that could change a few things. So I'm just going to let you have this. Sorry, man. I gotta bow out of this one.
All right, I think my connection's going. I think my voice. Elizabeth. No. So when did the show a few weeks ago? So was not known, at least to me at that time, when it was done. There was information, came out later, that what was going on in that synagogue was there were two homosexual men married having a circumcision for a child they adopted. So obviously we hold homosexuality is forbidden, right? That there's no question. I'm not gonna be quoted here and say, well, you look at what they did, so they deserved it. Well, they're innocent people that got killed also, right? But I made the claim, and I'll still stick to the claim, that anything that happens in the synagogue, right? Obviously, there's something to be said why it's happening, why it's happening there. I could understand, as we mentioned, by the Holocaust, and why it possibly happened in Berlin. I could understand that there are certain things that a person can bring upon themselves, right? And you could bring about God's ire, right? Is that the reason why it happened? We have no idea, right? We have absolutely no idea. But there are times also, the epicenter of an earthquake is a place of tremendous immorality. That's not a coincidence. Again, is that the reason it happened specifically there? I mean, you be the judge. But if you're doing, I'm just going to say, now you're going to get me real controversial. Now, if something like that is done, in a house of worship where the Torah states clear, there's no disagreement. Go back to our first video about homosexuality, right? It's clear as day it's forbidden. The book of Leviticus chapter 18, right? 100% forbidden, no question about it. You're going to do that in the synagogue? You're going to do that in the synagogue and think that, that there shouldn't be, okay, so they don't know anything, not educated, not this, not that, irrelevant. You're going to do something that egregious and think there are going to be no repercussions, think again. But again, I'm not saying that's the only reason. There'll be 100 reasons why it happened there. It just happens to be an interesting coincidence that that's exactly what was going on at that time, when it happened. Right.
Good point. Okay, we'll leave it at that for now, unless we get a lot of lovely fan mail requesting further insight. So
send it to him. Say, you brought it up. You deserve it, not me.
Yeah, that's how that's going to work. I see how you roll. Just send me a daggum bottle of scotch before you do. That way I can drink the entire thing before the show.
That's it. Got it.
All right, man. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you fine folks later on the other side. Shavua Tov, and love you guys. Thanks for all your support. Take care. Shalom, shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד